Yeah, maybe. No, I didn't. Anyway. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Banshee's Whale for our first episode of Tavern Talks. And we're going to be covering Dungeon Master tips and advice. So we got a panel with three of our DMs. We've got Robert, Suwaki, and Daniel. And so we've got a long list of questions, but if anybody's got questions, please go ahead and drop them in the chat. So without further ado, what was it? Grab a nail, prepare for a tale, for all are welcome at the Banshee's Whale. Hey, I'm hosting, man. It's different, you know?
It's different.
I'm usually the one that says it.
It's different when Rob is the one saying, I mean, I wrote it, but still. All right. Let's go ahead and kick things off. Let's go ahead and introduce yourself, Rob.
Well, I'm Rob, as I'm sure most are familiar with, the usual DM, DMing our one-shot sessions right now. I think I've been the most face on the channel altogether.
And co-founder of the Banshee's Whale.
And co-founder. And play as one of the bartenders of the Banshee's Whale.
Yeah. God, we started this back in what? That phone call was what, April of 2020, I think?
April of 2020, yeah.
Yeah.
It was, hey, you want to get a D&D group together?
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and kick things over to Suwaki. Suwaki, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Suwaki. Mostly just been playing on as far as Banshee's Will is concerned. DMing for like 3 years now, something like that.
Usually mostly in-person games, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I riff too much for online.
Hey, but we're gonna get the live session shows going here soon. I've got a whole box full of microphones and cameras. I'm working on setting up the rig for that. So big things here soon.
Looking forward to it.
And we're working on setting up remote sessions for the next person that we're introducing, which is Daniel out in California.
Yeah, my name is Daniel. I've been DMing now for about 2 years as well. I've been an occasional player on the Banshee's Whale, and unfortunately the last few months to a year has been like extraordinarily busy, so it's been hard for me to like pin down dates to actually, freaking play. But, once that clears up a little bit, I definitely want to start hopping on a plane here a little more and start DMing as well and get some sessions up for you guys.
That's the beauty of the Banshee's Whale, man. I mean, anytime we're here to facilitate when everything's clear up. But let's go ahead and kick things off. Let's open things up with our first question of the night. And this one, I will shoot over to Suwaki first. How did you get into D&D?
I wanted to get my non-nerd friends into playing D&D. The only way I could do that was by offering to DM a module for them.
How did you find out about it, though?
About DMing?
Well, about Dungeons & Dragons in general.
Dungeons & Dragons came from being a Magic player. So I played a lot of Magic the Gathering. And then someone was like, let's play Dungeons & Dragons. I was like, let's do it. Always wanted to try it. I think I bought a book once in like high school, looked at it, like read it, realized I had no idea what was going on, and then returned it. I think it was 4th edition too, so that would also make sense.
Magic is definitely the gateway for D&D for a lot of people, I think.
Well, fun fact, it was actually invented as a game to play in between turns, because in like AD&D, your turns were like an hour long sometimes, like going through all the different charts. You just play Magic in between.
Yeah, back when the maps were built on graph paper and all that good stuff.
Exactly.
All right, same question over to Daniel. Daniel, how did you find Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, so I actually found it working at a rec center with kids. One of my coworkers played D&D religiously, and so started asking questions one day. And I actually ran the theater club, so we did a lot of improv stuff. And he was like, "Hey man, if you like improv, you'd probably love D&D. Like it's a ton of role playing and a lot of action, so you'd probably have a good time." And lo and behold, he was right. That was back in 2016 or 17, somewhere in that ballpark. So I've been playing for a few years now, and my first thing I jumped into, I was actually a level 13 Dragonborn Paladin. I jumped into their campaign that had been going for years. So as a first-time player, I was a level 13 character. So as you can imagine, there was a a lot to figure out on the fly, but got hooked on it.
Nice. And Robert, how did you find Dungeons and Dragons?
True. I mean, depends on your form of D&D. Book wise, you actually introduced me to the Forgotten Realms with the Legend of Drizzt books. Video game wise, back when Baldur's Gate came out, playing that, didn't find out it was actually D&D till much later in life. And then playing just with some buddies, they had a D&D night. I hopped in, played a couple sessions, and then was asked to start DMing for a group during COVID.
And I believe the book that I actually got you into, well, the trilogy was the Icewind Dale Chronicles. That
Yes.
was, yeah.
All three of them in one big book. I actually still have it.
Nice. And I got that book actually from a guy named Christopher Rex when I was in the Marine Corps. I remember that. For me, it was I found D&D, OG D&D back in 1993. I started reading the books. I got hurt, ended up having a surgery, and it was one of the books that I found. Got into Hobbit, which led me kind of down that Anne McCaffrey or the Dragon Riders of Pern, Dragonlance Chronicles path, and didn't start playing it until Rob and I actually started this group. So, all right.
Very cool.
Let's go ahead and move over to our next question. What made you want to become a DM, a dungeon master? Let's start with Rob.
I was kind of just thrown into it. We wanted to get a D&D group together. I don't know if I ever played a player a handful of times, but wanted to get a reoccurring thing going. And the only way I figured out how to do that was to just jump into the role of a DM.
How about you, Suwaki? What got you into being a DM? I remember you said it earlier. You wanted to get your friends into playing D&D, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they were really into Stranger Things. Actually, I'd never watched the show yet. I hadn't watched it yet at that point. And they had just come out with the Stranger Things module. I was like, hey guys, I found the Stranger Things module. Will you play D&D if it's Stranger Things? And I run it. And they agreed. And then
You
it's
were
just
one of
been,
like the 4 people on the planet who hadn't seen Stranger Things yet.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I hadn't seen Stranger Things before playing the Stranger Things D&D campaign or
Nice.
DMing it.
Nice. I like how D&D was like your gateway into Stranger Things. Like
Yeah.
somehow that How about you, Daniel? How did you end up becoming a dungeon master?
So I used to work at a gym called EOS, and when I first got over to California, when I first transferred out this way, it's actually where I met Rob. But my GM at the time, he like right as like the gyms were starting to shut down, like things were happening with COVID, he kind of pulls me aside before we all get dispersed, and he goes, "Hey, you play D&D, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, we saw them playing on the Big Bang Theory, and it looks hilarious. Like, is it as fun as it looks?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's a super good time." He's like, "Well, could you like run a game for us?" And I was like, "I've never done it before." I was like, "I could figure it out though. I'll go buy like a pre-made module, and then we'll kind of play it by ear from there." And then I've been DMing ever since.
Nice. You got into that we need a DM trap. Same thing with Rob.
Yeah. Yeah, they were like,
into
we need one to run the games because none of us know the rules at all. And I was like, well, I know some of them. I'm not like super great with them, but okay, we'll roll with this and see what happens.
So it sounds like the consensus is everybody kind of stumbled into it because you guys all wanted to play D&D but just needed a DM. That's nice.
It's
Taking
usually
one for the
from
team.
what I've heard in the D&D community, that seems to be the kind of the consensus way someone becomes a DM. Is that you just kind of everyone's like, we nominate this person, so you're more voluntold than volunteered.
And it's a trap. You're then the forever DM.
Well, hey, Rob, you've been a player on the channel a couple of times.
Yeah.
Definitely get some more DMs in the rotation. We're definitely focusing on training people up. So it'll be good to see all the new content and the stories that people come up with on the channel. I'm super excited for what we've got in the future.
Same.
Now, for the ideal frequency of sessions, what do you guys think is kind of that sweet spot, right? we'll kick it off with Daniel. Daniel, do you think it's we'll give example like weekly, monthly? What is your sweet spot if you're going to run sessions?
I'm a big weekly fan. I like to go back to back every week as much as we can. And I know it can be tough. Everyone's an adult and they've got their lives to do and they got work and other family events or whatever. But I think weekly keeps the game the most fresh. And I think it gives the DM, from a storytelling perspective, the most fluidity in their stories when they can play more frequently. Um, Bi-weekly is not too bad. I don't like the monthly sessions because I think it's too much time in between if you're playing like a bigger campaign or a longer story. I think it works if you're doing like a one shot or like a one time run through.
Awesome. I agree. Yeah, and I've definitely, and Rob, you've been in those sessions too, and you've seen it is once you go to that like monthly, your players start forgetting things. I definitely have fallen into that my boat myself. How about you, Suwaki? What do you think is kind of that sweet spot? If you're going to run sessions as a dungeon master, what's the frequency you'd like to see?
I mean, yeah, kind of the same. Ideally, weekly would be good because that way it's fresh. You can keep the story kind of going in their minds. Like right now, my group IDM4 is monthly. It's like every like the first 30 minutes of the session is just recapping, remembering what happened, and there are little things that I give them. If they don't remember they have it, I have to like constantly remind them, well, you have this item that you can use there, and that's why I gave it to you. So definitely weekly or bi-weekly at the least. Monthly works, but it gets a little difficult.
Yeah, and I think like at that point you can kind of get to what's driving your players to need monthly and try and accommodate that with like maybe a hybrid type of thing. But we can definitely cover that here in a bit too. How about you, Robert? What do you think is your ideal frequency for sessions?
For sessions, whether really just in campaigns, I actually prefer bi-weekly. When it comes to doing things like Roll20, when you come up with new ideas, it takes a little bit of time for the setup and getting everything there, which I tend to do a lot after a session. I'll come up with this cool idea, but if I only had a week to actually get it adapted to the campaign, I think I'd be rushing a lot.
Hmm. I wonder if we can, because we've definitely been exploring platforms lately. I wonder if would you say it's more of like a limitation on Roll20 where you kind of have to start over each time and maybe iterate when you're creating sessions? Or do you think you'd benefit maybe from one cohesive world that you kind of create stories within?
Actually, the one shots, at least for me, give me the flexibility when it comes to campaigns and coming up with new ideas is where it really comes in. I don't think it's Roll20 really, because the big thing is building maps, finding if it's a new monster, finding that sheet, getting it added in, getting everything set up, and then writing out some dialogue if there's new NPCs, things like that. I'm somebody that likes to adapt and change things on the fly based on the player's decisions.
I
And
can agree with that.
I've definitely been seeing that too in the sessions where you'll change like the final episode based on the decisions that the players make throughout the one shots. Like this season, where you've been definitely, I know you were talking about with the Frost King making him stronger or weaker based on the decisions in the different episodes. So yeah, it's really, really cool seeing you pivot and kind of have things affect other things like that. Really rad.
Yeah, let's see how they dealt with it this time.
But how do you find that perfect balance between combat and role play when you're building sessions, Robert?
um, I I think my nice place of it is about 25% combat. There's enough combat to break up the role play and make things interesting and spicy. And that could be whether it's just like one big thing or multiple enemies, or even just the opportunity for combat. Um, if it's going into a camp where they could either do combat or stealth around, things like that. I think breaking that up in the role play and conversation points, break it up, but give it enough of it.
How about you, Daniel? How do you find that sweet spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on your party. I think you have to know who you're playing with. So, like for my party that I DM most of the time, they are the most squirrely little ADHD bunch you've ever seen. So they can't stay on track for more than 5 seconds. So like things kind of have to happen fast for them to stay engaged. So typically speaking, it's really all the campaigns I write for them are combat heavy or like action heavy. Like things have to be happening. They're not so much into the role play aspect where they're talking to each other amongst the camp or at the tavern. They want to get into mischief. Like they want to get into things and they want to break things, mess with things, fight people. Like I can't even tell you how many campaigns have started off with a tavern brawl because they walk into a tavern and start fighting people. And so it's like, every once in a while I'll throw in like someone they cannot beat in a fist fight wherever they're at their levels just to mess with them. But the sweet spot really is going to depend on your players, I think, ultimately speaking. Like some players love to role play, some players love to fight. You got to figure out what your party really likes to do and then kind of play to their tendencies.
Sounds like you're DMing sessions for Ricky Bobby's kids. Anarchy!
Oh man, like one of them, this is like a couple weeks ago, or like last time I was DMing a session, they were in a city trying to figure out where the key to this gate to go underground was. And as they're trying to figure this out, they're all on the right track. And one of them goes into the shop and like, what's in this shop? I was like, clothing, like clothing that matches the city. And they're like, well, I want to buy clothes. I was like, everyone else is like in the temple trying to fight and find the key. What do you, like? You're just gonna sit here and shop for clothes? Well, yeah. Do I like them? Like, what do they look like? And so it's like that's the kind of like group I have. So it's fun though. It makes it interesting as a DM.
Yeah, sounds like it. How about you, Suwaki? How do you find that sweet spot?
I think it's the same thing. It depends on the group. My group is definitely ADHD, but the opposite, where they get bored with combat. So it's just constantly just doing like role play, like having them figure things out, giving them a lot of decisions. They give them a lot of decisions that really kind of like their brains break a little bit. They can't make a decision. Just watching them kind of
paralysis by analysis sort of a thing.
Yeah, exactly. So if I give them like 2 or 3 decisions to go off of, they'll spend an hour discussing the decisions like in character. So less work for me, and they're playing the game more in depthly.
Yeah,
I usually throw in like a little bit of combat because I have one player that like likes to do. He's a druid at like a high level, so he likes to summon a bunch of animals to fight. But beyond that, we keep the combat pretty sparse.
Now, homebrew versus pre-made. So when would you, Suwaki, let's go to you first. When would you choose one over the other?
I mean, I don't think there's like necessarily a certain time where one's better than the other, but I do strictly homebrew. I think the only time I have done like official is the Stranger Things one shot, and then I did Princess of the Apocalypse, and that was not that great. So that group kind of fizzled out. But I think homebrew lets you kind of adapt to your players more. Like I have players that like to set up a business in every single town they go to.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, every town is trying to like set up some kind of a business. So
hey, they're entrepreneurs, right?
Right, exactly. So I think homebrew just lets you kind of cater to your players' likes and dislikes a little bit better than a module does.
Yeah, it's harder to pivot and like make up NPCs and drop them into like a pre-made, right?
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Daniel? When would you use a homebrew? When would you homebrew versus when would you pre-made?
I'm in a similar situation as Suwaki. Every campaign I've ran has been homebrewed except for the very first one I ever ran because I didn't know what to do as a DM. So I bought the starter kit pre-module, where you start off with you have to do those 6 quests in the town and then you end up fighting the dragon at the end. And from there, I actually built out a homebrew based on what they did in that campaign. And very similar to Suwaki, that same party overthrew the town mayor and began to rule the town, and they collected taxes. Like they asked me, like, how much gold per month does this town bring in? Because we want a percentage of it. And I was like, and I had to like sit there and figure it out on the fly. And like, because I never expected it. Like they defeated the dragon, saved the town, and then they were like, "So where's the mayor?" And I was like, "He's over here." And then one of them was like, "I cast fireball on him." I was like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, we want to run the town now." And I was like, "Hold on, time out." But I think I think homemade is good. I think homebrew is really good. But I also think there's nothing wrong with doing a pre-made or a pre-con because it's just if you don't want to have to think as much and you want something just built for you and you just want to run the game itself, if your time constraints are there, it's a really good option. It's a really nice way to kind of have something built out for you. You don't have to sit there and develop NPCs, personalities, encounters, whatever. You can just run the show.
Yeah. It sounds like we're going to need to do a Tavern Talk, a deep dive on how to homebrew, because it's definitely something that I prefer also myself. Just because, like you guys said, it allows you to pivot, right? It allows you to kind of think on the fly, adapt, drop in monsters, drop in encounters and stuff. But how about you, Robert? When would you homebrew versus when would you pre-made?
Oh, one year echoing, so somebody's got an echo going through.
I'm hearing that also.
Is it
Same.
me?
Well, you have a green dot popping up every time after someone else speaks.
Probably.
Let me.
Oh, so-
Maybe. I don't know. Might have gone away.
Did that
Maybe
fix
game-
it?
I think we're good.
I just
Hopefully.
separated my mic from my computer a little bit, so that might have.
Okay.
That'll do it.
Yeah, that might have solved the problem.
Yeah.
All right. So homebrew versus pre-made. I think pre-mades are fantastic for newer DMs, or DMs that are trying to run something quickly. I think the others can agree that building an entire homebrew world takes a bit of time. A lot of time. And sometimes
Takes a lot of time.
you have players that want to start something next week. And there's also an aura around pre-mades, but I think what a lot of people kind of forget is that you can adjust pre-mades. They're kind of there to be an overarching story, but you can add things. I'm sure you guys remember me throwing things like that to Tyranny of Dragons. You can adjust pre-mades. I think homebrewing an entire world and a long campaign is something more for an experienced DM. Just because there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, building NPCs.
Well, yeah, and keep in mind when we're talking about homebrew, it's not just long campaign, right? Long campaign, short campaign. It could be anything as short as an encounter, like a quick homebrew encounter that you throw together using D&D Beyond, their encounter builder. Something as simple as that, right? Taking maybe a map that you found on Reddit or something like that, and kind of throwing in a couple NPCs and giving yourself like week over week, like right? Because when you homebrew, you only need to make like enough for that night or that encounter or something like that, a quick session, so
Yeah, and that's one thing I think with pre-mades as well, is you can still do that. I think especially for newer DMs that want to play around with homebrew, maybe take a pre-written and play with the story a bit, have some fun with it. So I think especially going in as a new DM or even playing with new players, because some DMs will homebrew to their liking. Whereas, new players might not be great with certain combat encounters. But there's also the thing with some pre-mades that aren't set up great. Like we all love Curse of Strahd, but God is the beginning of it difficult. And you need to homebrew that thing down to their level.
Well, that say Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, right? A lot of that was just, we're going to give you a framework, you need to homebrew. A lot of these sessions like Van Richten's, Candlekeep, and in fact, Candlekeep mysteries, there's a lot that really they don't provide much. It's like really quick down and dirty stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff like Van Richten's where it didn't even have maps for some of the realms of dread, right? Some of the areas. So even with a lot of these modules, I think that's a lot of the misconception also, is that it doesn't give you everything, so you are going to have to be a free thinker, kind of be brave in a lot of these. But that kind of leads us to our next question. But, how would you how do you normally build your combat encounters, Rob? Do you use tools or anything like that?
I will say that I build the overarching frame myself, the idea of what type of monsters I want to be there, but I definitely use Combat Builder, just the .com, to double check my work and make sure that I'm not making things too difficult.
Yeah. How about you, Suwaki? How do you build your combat encounters normally?
I'm really loose when I do it. So usually so I have like an overarching world that I've created that I do all of my campaigns in. So usually just fighting like dwarves or something like that, um, or I'll see like something I don't know on TikTok that week, and they're like, all right, you guys are gonna fight this somehow. I'll just like pull up the stat block and then find some way to fit it in. But to be honest, I don't do a whole lot of preparation with it. And then as far as like, because I don't really keep track of like hit points and stuff like that, I just kind of play it until I see them kind of like losing interest, and then kind of end it there. So I'm not too worried about too much of the like, abilities or whatever of the monster. It's enough to keep it like entertaining for them for a couple rounds.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, because I mean, what's the point of trying to tell a story if the players are too bored to want to finish the story?
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Daniel? Do you use any tools or anything to build your encounters?
I don't use any tools. I have like a little system that I've made for myself that I end up following. First one being terrain. You know, what's the terrain they're going to be fighting, and does it make sense for that monster or that creature to be there? If it doesn't, I'm not going to have them fight a merfolk in the middle of the desert. You know, it doesn't make any sense. So that's like my first thing. And then I decide, are they going to be surprise attacked, or are they going to run into this creature? So do they have foresight on it, or are they just going to get, slapped on, and the next thing you know, you're in combat? And then from there, I balance out the power, which I've got like a whole little system in terms of like action economy, a combination of AC to HP, party versus enemies, to make sure that that's leveled out so that like each fight can feel like a struggle, but for different reasons.
Yeah, and actually, we're gonna jump around the questions a little bit, but kind of going back into where you were talking about with the maps and the themes of all of your encounters, right? So, uh, how do you build like? Do you use 3D? Because you're doing in-person sessions, Daniel. So, are you
Correct.
using like 3D printed assets when you're doing these things, or are you using like what do your battle maps look like? Is it a full detail color battle map, or is it like graph paper with pen and
Yeah, so
mark?
it's like it's the graph paper, like the vinyl one that you can get from like most game shops. So I have that as my battle maps. I have nine vinyl maps, and then I'll alternate around based on size or need or whatever the case may be. And I draw mostly in black ink just for the framework, and then if something needs to be in a different color because it's a hint to my players, pay attention to that, then I'll do that. But for the most part, I keep it all in black just to save on ink. But yeah, I'll use like little minis and stuff like that, and then I do have like these little flat like pictures of like trees and stuff like that that came in a little set, and I'll lay those out for some flavor just to give everything a little more life to it. Um, yeah, that's pretty much how I end up building out like the actual setting of the encounter, and then I try to factor in like space and stuff like that, because obviously there's some people that are good with AOE spells, or some people try to rely on their movement. And usually per combat encounter, I'll pick one or two of them that I'm going to specifically pick on, and like try to limit their abilities and make them think outside the box, make them think about their character and how they use it.
I like how we're trying to like get people to stop thinking that their DMs are against them and trying to kill them. And you're like, yeah, no, I find two people and I pick on them.
I mean, look, I'm not here to pick. I'm not here to like make anyone's life harder. But like, if the monk has been running around in circles, beating up all the NPCs and taking all the fun from everybody else, I'm gonna put you in a little box.
That's what
like,
monks do. Monks gonna monk, okay? 60 feet of movement per round plus dash. I mean, come on, plus flight speed, depending on what kind of monk. I mean, come on, 120 feet. Who doesn't love a monk that can run up walls and slow fall and jump off of everything, and
right.
basically you can't kill him with movement? How about you, Suwaki? What do your in-person maps look like?
So I use these little magnetic printed, 3D printed little things. So I'll just make
Here, raise it
whatever
up a little bit
terrain.
higher. We've got the
Yeah.
the nameplate. There we go.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
so
Heck yeah.
they're magnetic. So I'll usually lay those out. I've got like a whole bunch of like random 3D printed terrain that I'll throw in on there. But to be honest, a lot
you're
of our
putting that
battles,
3D printer to use.
yeah, yep, they're usually running all day, every day. Like in our last session, we didn't even use a battle map. It was such an epic battle. Like it was just all theater of the mind. It's like there's no way we can use a map for this flying ship and this building over here and all these like an army of Kenku trying to escape. There's kind of all theater of the mind for that, which worked out pretty well.
Nice. Sounds like we need to go to Monument Hobbies and set up a little thing and try and get sponsored from Monument or something for our paints. Let's go downtown,
go.
hit them up. How about you, Robert? How do you use? I know on the channel you use a lot of full color, but how are you going and creating these battle maps?
Well, I mean, yeah, on the channel and on most of my off-channel sessions, it's all virtual tabletop. So I actually use Dungeon Draft to make my own maps, or find some just on Reddit that I like. If it's definitely off-channel, just because I do like with combat and everything, just being able to see it and knowing that there's certain objects in the way or difficult terrain, things like that. Takes it to where players can think a bit more and use the environment more. If I find if players can't see things, they forget about it. So if I point out that there's this giant chandelier in the room, linked to a chain across the room, well, on the map it's still there. 3 rounds later, if it's all theater of the mind, most are going to forget about it in 3 rounds. Mm-hmm. So I like using actual visuals a lot. On actual tabletop, same. I have tiles that click together to build my maps. But again, I use objects, things like that. So I'm very visual.
So for these maps, are you now in a lot of these sessions, are you building out puzzles for these?
Depending on the map, if it's like a temple, like something that's been abandoned for a long time or has treasure to be found, usually there's a map or a trap guarding it. If it's just an open field, unless there's some goblins laying down some spike traps or pitfalls, usually not. But so it depends. But a lot of the times I do like to use traps, yes.
How about you, Daniel? Traps and puzzles, are you building them into your in-person sessions?
Absolutely. I think my players really love them, especially my group. They love puzzles. So like there was one encounter where they had to get up a tower and there was 4 levels to it, and every level of the tower was a different puzzle for them to get up to the next space. So they love them. I like to do them because they're fun. They're creative. You can really pull a lot of like abstract things because it's a puzzle. Like it's not like direct combat, so you don't necessarily have to power scale it. You just have to make sure that if they don't solve it or if they solve it incorrectly, there are some repercussions for them doing so. And like in that same tower example, the final puzzle, one of them had to sacrifice their character for them to move on. So like I built in like a kill spot, but that was just because like that character's arc had played itself out, and that character needed to write a new character to get kind of back into the campaign and more into the flow of things.
Yeah. It sounds like we need to send you over to Art of Play. Since you're doing a lot of in-person puzzles and stuff like that, we could send you over to Art of Play where you could get actual physical puzzles or something to hand to your players and be like, here's this Rubik's Cube. If you don't solve it, your entire party dies. Go.
Yeah, right. If you can't open this box right here, if you can't figure out the little sequence of operations,
everybody make them put their finger in like a Chinese finger trap or something. How about you, Suaki? Are you building for your in-person sessions puzzles and traps on your
yeah, that's actually what I do. I usually find like little trick boxes that I can print out, little puzzle boxes, and actually have them do actual little puzzles. For last session, 2 sessions ago, I made them do an actual puzzle, like a 100-piece puzzle. I was like, you have to figure this puzzle. Yeah, jigsaw puzzle, exactly. I was like, yeah,
in an hour.
Oh
it's only 100 pieces. It's like, all right.
We have a Cricut. We could totally like get that adhesive and like make our own jigsaw puzzles and have it be like a Rickroll or something.
There you go.
Or do one of those puzzles where it's like one solid color with no border. One of those like puzzles that's just meant to drive you crazy.
Yeah. Well, no, so I gave him a time limit. I was like, all right. I put a little
say I'm a rough DM.
Egg timer?
Egg timer, like a little sand clock thing. I can't Hourglass.
Yeah.
Little hourglass. And they were in combat while it was happening. So as you cannot help in the puzzle when it's your turn, and you have until this hourglass runs out of time. It ran out of time, and I think the first time like they took a bunch of damage because like something happened, and like an electric shock through the whole room. It took them like 20 minutes to do the puzzle and the combat, so I forget what I did for the second time when time ran out. But they really enjoyed that. At least they seem to. Never asked them, but they seem to really enjoy that one. It made them like very engaged. Especially they're like I said, they're all ADHD. Squirrels is the term we use, so
I can definitely sympathize on that one. So this kind of leads me into my next one. So TPKs. How do you handle TPKs? Do you have your players all create new characters, Suwaki, or do you just end the session and just close things down there?
right, don't tell my players, but they're never at risk of a TPK. Unless their character wants to die, they're never going to die. So I'll make it look like they're going to die. They've rolled death throws plenty of time. But my character, like my players, unless they tell me they're tired of playing their character, will never lose their character. So I've never TPK'd before, but I assume so. And I think I got this from one of the modules I did. If I was a TPK, they'd probably just all wake up like they were like knocked out in the fight, not like they died in the fight. Like they got captured, and now they're in prison, and they have to break out of that prison without their gear and find it all.
I like that. How about you, Rob? How do you handle your TPKs? I know we did have one before.
He didn't even ask if you do it. He just asked, "What do you do when it happens?" Because we all know that you do it, you dick.
Yeah, you TPK. There is no argument. Rob TPK. Rob has wiped everybody out.
I lost 2 players in one campaign.
I think all of you have experienced my TPKs.
I think I had the longest running character in that for like over a year, and he still wiped me out.
Oh, 100%. No. I believe 100%. I believe in risk and reward.
Well, I had zombie meat shields and all that stuff too. Yeah. I was using Bradley as a zombie meat shield, and finally he was like, "No, you're gonna die. All right, you're gonna die right now."
You killed Bradley. You permadeath Bradley.
Oh yeah, totally permadeath.
Those banshees.
I wasn't even thinking of that.
Yeah, I wasn't the one that TPK'd Bradley. That was Mark. He used a banshee to get to it, but with TPK,
you dropped like 5 banshees on the healer.
There was 1.
There was 3.
And it's not my fault. 3. The others, there were 2 were ghosts. 1 was a banshee. I remember.
I was frightened, so I was running away.
Yeah, I was gonna say 1 was frightened. 2 was frightened actually, and then it was just you and Bradley, and then you used him as a meat shield with all 3 of the specters.
Poor Bradley.
No, I like the risk of it. I think, especially after a TPK, players are a bit more cautious and play that way when it comes to traps, puzzles, getting into combat. We all have friends and people that have played in our campaigns that kick down doors and run into an entire raid party.
I've never done that. Why are you looking at me? That is not something Daniel's ever done. I've totally done
it. Leroy Jenkins has been a thing yelled out on multiple episodes.
Listen, find the footage. All the tapes. I didn't do it.
Oh, I've got the tapes. I've got all of the footage. I have all of it.
So when it's appropriate, I use TPKs. Now, I have in the past saved players against popular belief from TPKing because it fit canonically. You end up in jail, or you had an NPC that saved one of you after the others left one behind to die.
Been there.
Yeah.
Everybody ditched the healer. Everybody took off and left the healer alone, and boom, done.
Yeah, and a Behir was just waiting on the ceiling, but things are fine after that. But yeah, I think when it's appropriate and it has that aura of everyone could wipe, it fits. Now, if you're not in a point, if it's just a random combat encounter, I don't think you should wipe a party with a random combat encounter. That doesn't matter to the story whatsoever.
Dude, I swear, Minds of Fendover is just like PTK material, like all through every starting like level 1 campaign is just like ways to wipe your whole party. If you're not an experienced DM and don't know to like relax on those or just bump everybody up to level 2 right away, you're gonna crush every party that you can.
Or
Like,
the
it's
beginning of
insane.
Tyranny of Dragons, where a group of 3 level 1 players fight 5 kobolds with pack tactics.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when it's appropriate, and I actually, with TPKs, again, where it fits story-wise, I have them reroll. I have them make a new character. No, you can't make the same race and class. You can't have them be their twin, their long-lost twin that's now looking for them, that looks and sounds and acts exactly like the other one. Because it's all about having fun, and you gotta make new characters sometimes.
Got to experience all of the 849 different combinations of subclass and subclass that you can do. And that's without
Exactly.
multi-classing.
I get it. For some reason, you just continue to play variant human fighter, but sometimes you got to play something else.
And I think people get too attached, right? They get too attached to that class and they're like, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my character." And it's like, no, man, you can play like any of the infinite combinations of characters. Like, don't get too attached. But how about you, Daniel? How do you leverage TPKs and handle them when they come up?
So I intentionally try to build my combat encounters so that TPKs don't happen because I'm not a big fan of party wipes because I'm a very story driven DM. Like a lot of my stories, there's a lot of reason why those particular characters are invested into the story. So I try not to kill the whole party because I think that kind of interrupts the story and it slows it down unnecessarily. But that's just personally for my games. But I do believe in like spot killing. So like if I have a situation where players tired of their character or their arc has completely played out and there's really nothing left for them in this campaign, okay, then it's time to smack that player down, let you write a new one so that we can reintroduce you back into the campaign so you can have more fun, be more invested. Like recently in a campaign, I had that happen where a player, their arc had really come to a full fruition and it was very satisfying. Like the player was very satisfied, the party was satisfied with how that player's arc went, but it left her feeling very uninvested in the story.
Mhm.
So we had to do something to get her more re-engaged, and I couldn't really figure anything with her backstory. So she ended up dying in a combat encounter, and then rewrote a character, and now she's like way back into it. So it's good.
Yeah, and I mean, there's stuff like say with the new like I said, I'm reading Glacier's Edge right now by
Mhm.
Bob Salvatore, which is new 1 D&D, right? It's Avon
Yeah.
Drow, it's all that. Good Drow, spoiler alert for people who haven't read D&D in the last 4 years. Didn't know that there was a thing about good Drow up north, but like he did was say you had the companions of the hall, right? Well, not all of them. You had Catti Artemis Entreri, you had Jarlaxle, you had and Zaknafeek, right? So you
Mhm.
have you have a 4-person party. They go into the cavern of a big bad. Instant PTK. Everybody wiped out, but they're frozen in place. They're not dead, they're frozen. And so now you have a 14-person raiding party in Glacier's Edge that comes in and has to go and save them because they can get there. But like they think Doomwheel is dead and like all this other crazy stuff happening. So like it could even be a narrative where, say if you've got 4 players and you want to like even what Rob did where he you killed, I think it was Merlin, that you turned into a zombie thrall in one episode that we had to fight against, where you took a
Yeah.
dead player and it became the thrall of the bad guy and the Frost King.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely like it when you see kind of when you see creative narrative and elements like that, because you can leverage it, right?
Yeah, and I do agree with Rob though too. There are times you got to kind of smack your players in the mouth to make them understand there
Yeah.
is a real threat. Like
Yeah,
you can't
and
just
kind
run
of
around and do
along
whatever you
those,
want.
like, so when do you introduce things like skill checks for your players, Daniel? What would trigger those for you, and how do you trigger them?
Yeah, so for my little ADD party, they roll for everything, like literally everything that you can think of. Like if they want to put their shoes on, they pretty much roll for it because like they love to stay engaged and they have to like be doing stuff with their hands to stay engaged. So, but I'll intentionally make the DC really low if it's something that they should just be good at inherently, right? Like if it's like a rogue trying to pick a lock, I'm going to set the DC pretty low for them because they're a rogue. Like they should be good at stealing things. But if, let's say, my Goliath barbarian is trying to pick a lock, you're not going to pick a lock, dog. Like that's not your skill set. But,
itty bitty thieves tools.
Yeah, so it really just depends on each character. But I very wildly fluctuate the DC depending on how good I think they should be at the thing or what their backstory entails and that kind of stuff like that. And some things are just flat out impossible. I tell my players that all the time. Like, just because you roll a nat 20 doesn't mean your skill check's going to work. It just means you're going to get the best possible outcome.
I can definitely appreciate that. Suaki, it looked like you were agreeing with a lot of those things, like keeping your players engaged with skill checks. How do you leverage them?
So kind of the same. I don't really give it a DC. So if I know they're going to succeed, they're going to succeed. If they roll a 1, they're going to succeed. It's just how well, like they're going to do it essentially. So, if they're, if they're the rogue picking the lock, they roll a 1, well, it's going to take them some time and maybe they might, I don't know, something will happen during that time. If it's a 20, then, just narrate it really quick. They did it really quick and in a really kind of cool fashion.
Yeah.
It's just more kind of like to keep them engaged than actually, is this check going to mean yes or no for you getting through this door? Because you're going to get through the door. But why make you roll like a skill check for it 1,000 times? Just see how cool or how not cool you do it.
Well, and kind of in that same vein, right? If like a character walks into the room and they want to take a look at something or they want to investigate a new room, like how would you handle that? Would you have them like voluntarily roll for investigation, perception? How would you do that? Especially say if there's something that you want them to find in that room, right? How would you engage the player that walks into that room? How would you trigger that skill check to get them to try and find that thing you want them to find?
So it would usually depend on the player. So say like there's a switch behind a painting. I'd have them roll, and then just kind of depending on what they rolled is how vague or how specific I got. But I would always kind of mention the painting. So they're going to realize at some point that the painting is the way to get there. And with the amount of like decision making my party goes through, it's going to take them 20 minutes of like bickering whether or not they touch the painting. But if they roll high, I'm gonna let them know it's like it's safe to go to that painting and that's where they want to go.
Passive perception, like 2, right?
Exactly, right. Yeah, if they roll like a 2, it's like, well, it's a painting and like it seems okay. Something where like because they're all experienced players, so they know that like they know what DM speech is. So if I say like it seems okay, they know to like be a little wary of it, even though it's fine, it's completely fine. But if I say it seems okay, they're gonna spend 20 minutes debating on who's gonna touch it.
Kind of like when Rob tells us that a hallway looks all clear. We know that it's a trap.
I literally never trust a word Rob says ever.
I know, right?
I don't trust a single word comes out of his mouth.
Hang on, my favorite thing I've ever done was the safe room that had the
my God
safe room over it.
I was gonna call back to that. Oh my God, Suaki, weren't you in that one?
Yeah,
with the safe room.
It was the Mummy Tomb. You guys were in it. It had the word safe room written in. In like Elvish, and it was indeed a safe room, but they just ignored it.
We need to get back to that one. We really need to get back to that one. I want to run that Avernus campaign that we were running for that one. That thing had so many good mechanics. We need to bring that one back for the channel. Definitely.
Might homebrew into a different part of that.
I
can do
that. How do you trigger that, Rob? How do you get your players to engage with the elements that you're dropping down, right? How do you trigger those skill checks?
So I make my players be very specific with what they're trying to do. I am very against, I walk into a room, do I notice anything with my perception? No, you don't. I want you to look around, find things, check under things. If you check something directly, I don't even require a skill check. If there's something in a drawer and you open the drawer, you find it. If it's a panel underneath of it, it'll require skill check unless your passive skills are high enough. So I actually keep track of my players' stat sheets. And if you're just good at something, you just do it. But if you're just on the border of it or bad at it, you're gonna need a skill check, and I determine based on your passive skills how difficult that skill check is.
And I think that's a big important note to a lot of new DMs, right? Is to keep track of your player's passive perception so that way you can know when a certain player walks into a room, right? What's going to happen. But so
And
Rob, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, even outside of passive perception, just the base stats, like a rogue doing a picking a lock. I don't know if you have a 1 at sleight of hand, you're a pretty bad rogue at picking locks.
Yeah.
So I'm still gonna do a skill check. But if you're a rogue with 10 to sleight of hand, you're picking the lock.
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering what that rogue is made for, right? The low dex rogue. Like, how did you pick? I want to meet that guy, and I want to talk to that person, right? I want to understand logically, thematically how you did that. I want to know. So for these, Rob, how big is your ideal session? Like for online, where's that sweet spot for you on group size?
Oh, group size?
Mhm.
Three players. I think 3 players gives everyone enough talking time where it's not people talking over each other or somebody waiting 20 minutes to finally get to do something. I think 3 is that ideal sweet spot, and for combat encounters, so they're just not drawn out.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen people on the streams get frustrated with that. I know people even on this show, even this episode have been frustrated with that. I myself have found that, right? When you start getting talked over. And I know like myself, I talk a lot. It just happens. And I don't mean to, step on people, but I think, yeah, for me, kind of that 3 person, because once you start getting bigger than that, you definitely start stepping on people. But what about you,
And
Daniel?
I think it's a little different being an in-person player because obviously we're not dealing with like mic and receiving sound and audio output. We're all in the same room together at the same time. So I found that 4 is like my ideal sweet spot. I love DMing a group of 4 because I feel like, again, same thing Rob said, everyone gets a lot of time to do combat, to do some action, talking. It gives me a chance as a DM to really flush out their backstory and make sure that backstory makes sense for what the character is doing. Um, 5 is okay. I don't mind doing 5. Five's not too bad as long as you don't have 5 big personalities because then it gets really tough. 6 is the biggest I'll go. I won't go past 6 players anymore. I've done a 7-player campaign once, and that was brutal to try to manage everybody feeling a part of the story and getting time to talk, time to do things, time to fight. Like it's a lot of things to manage. Whereas 4, even 5 is a pretty nice little spot where you can manage everything pretty easily.
How about you, Sawaki? How many people do you normally have in your in-person sessions? Where's your favorite group size?
um, it varies. It depends on which group I'm DMing. I have a group of 4. I have a group of 7. But it helps that they're all
Really?
friends. Yeah. And they're all friends, and a lot of them are newer to D&D.
Hmm.
So the like 2 of them are pretty experienced, so they kind of take the lead on a lot of things. But um, they just kind of have like they just kind of hang out as their characters with each other. So I'd lucked out with that big group. But I'd say I like 5. I like having a good variety of different classes, and if someone misses a session, it's not like detrimental to something I've planned if they're down a man or something like that.
Very cool. Yeah, and 7. That'd be I'd want to sit and hear that because that to me would just be chaos. Like that, especially on like where we do like the remote sessions on the channel. Like, woo. But I think in person, yeah, I
In
want
person is
to.
different because yeah, in person you even though like we have cameras we can see each other, there's still a lot of like body language we're missing out on. A lot
Yeah.
of things we're missing out on. Whereas in person, it's like it might for the first like little bit, maybe there's some um, give and take that needs to be there, but it gets figured out pretty quickly.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads me into like my next topic of discussion, which would be Suwaki. What are your kind of pros and cons for playing in person versus playing remotely?
My only con for playing in person is scheduling gets a little bit more difficult. But I will hybrid it. I'll do it hybrid. So if somebody can't make the session, but they can remote in, I will remote that person in, and then everyone else will just play in person. My cons for me, just the way that I DM is remote play. Just because I have like when I do a session, I have 2 bullet points. I don't know how we're gonna get there. We're gonna figure that out together. Me as DM, them as the players. But I don't know, if we're gonna be in a town or if we're gonna be in the ocean. My players all have airships, so I don't know if we're gonna be in the air. Um, so in person, it lets me kind of do that. Over remote, I think I'd be spending too much time going in between maps and things like that, or creating maps. I usually create entire towns on the fly for that session.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely where we're going to be leaning towards that in the future, is setting up those in-person sessions for the stream also. So that, yeah, because that's a big preference I've noticed. And you definitely kind of get that ambiance, right? You get that playing off of each other. What about you, Daniel? What are your pros and cons of in-person versus remote?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with remote. I think the pros for remote is the special effects and the building of the maps. I feel like you can be a lot more accurate with what you want to do. And I think the lighting is really cool. The visibility is really cool. I think a lot of those factors make it a lot of fun. Being able to play from anywhere with anyone, awesome, because you can play with people that we're not in the same state. Like right now, I'm in California. I'm not even in the same state as you guys, but we can still play D&D or have this Tavern Talk because we can come in remotely. So I love those aspects of it. The only thing I really don't like is just not being in the same room as everybody. Like I think that's one of the biggest pros for playing tabletop is that, like, if I'm playing a character and I want to, reach over and tap, and tap Sawaki and be like, hey, we need to pay attention to this. Like, it allows you to role play a little more actively and a little more thoroughly. So I think that gets to be a lot of fun. And instead of having to whisper in a channel, you literally lean over to the person and whisper to them, and whoever's paying attention can pick up on it. So it's a lot of fun. I think it adds a lot more dynamics with that, being in person. And then my only con for in person is the scheduling. Like Sawaki says, that sometimes life gets in the way and you got to do other things and you can't all meet up at the same time. But it helps that the group I DM, we're all pretty much best friends and we all hang out pretty much every weekend anyways. So like, makes that a lot easier.
That's that guy's poker night, right? Or
Yeah.
that group poker night, right? And that's kind of where
Absolutely.
it is for me too. Is that's how D&D is.
Yeah, well, I got lucky. I married a woman who loves playing D&D with me, so like, I can't really complain. Like she's been in every campaign that I've ever ran, and like right now we're playing in one together, and like I'm trying to smash. I'm trying to smash in game.
I'm trying to hook up with my wife in the game.
Yes, smashception.
Yeah, and I kind of, my wife, doesn't play with us or anything like that, but it's definitely nice to have that support, right? From your
Absolutely.
significant other, to understand that, this is your creative outlet, this is your group. It's definitely nice having that. How about you, Robert? What are your pros and cons in person versus remote?
I like remote, honestly, a bit more, because of the workload. Again, I'm somebody that loves visuals, and making maps physically takes so much longer than it does virtually, and it becomes super expensive. I have printed out full-size maps just for pre-written like campaigns. Like we ran Lost Mine of Fandever. I printed out every map on like board size. It cost me like $80 just for those maps.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
Just printing them on decent paper. And Dungeon Draft, you get somebody to buy it for you and share the code.
We're not doing that. Not at all. No idea.
So I think that's where it is. And again, the scheduling. It's really hard to talk Daniel into driving 8 hours for a D&D session.
Yeah.
Hey, if I could, I would. If I win the Powerball on Wednesday, consider it done, buddy.
He's buying the maps.
Oh, if I win the Powerball, I'm building an office that we can, I'll have like an apartment, like building set up for people to, stay at whenever they're in town.
Warehouse.
Yeah, just basically get a big warehouse We're gonna play in the middle of it.
But
Yeah.
I do love in person because people feed off of each other. Being around each other, everything gets very wild sometimes. Which I will say, I have had to wrangle people to calm down and get back to the game way more often in person than I do remotely.
I mean, strangle people back in or rant, right?
Only you.
And we're kind of coming to the end of time here, so we'll cut out some of the questions and go right towards the end. Rob, what's your one D&D monster that you've always wanted to face off against?
Oh, for me to face.
Mhm.
Oh, cool.
As a
That's good
player,
one.
what's your monster you've always wanted to fight in a session?
Tarask is too easy.
Aarakocra.
Exactly. You can beat him at level one
Aarakocra,
Aarakocra.
Celestial Warlock. Boom, done.
Yeah, level 1 can beat a Tarask. I would say like not Tiamat, but like a Great Worm. Like something that's ridiculous, super dramatic, flying over. But
Like a god
we're
being, like Lull,
yeah.
that kind of level.
Well, not even just a god, but like just a natural disaster, like a great
Yeah.
like a great worm,
Yeah.
something that happens naturally, but you're level 20 because you have to be.
How about you, Daniel? What's that one monster you've always wanted to fight?
I got two, so I kind of cheated. I have two answers for this one. So my first one's a dragon.
There
I've
you go.
never fought a dragon in all of my D&D playings ever.
Play
Not
next
one.
season.
And I'll play next season. I'm down. I've always wanted to fight a dragon like so bad. Like I've ran dragons against my players, but I want to fight one really bad because it just seems like it'd be an interesting encounter.
Here's a thought. Could you imagine fighting a dragon inside of a dungeon?
Yeah, I've done it to my players. I put a big treasure pile in the middle of a lava lake, and like they dove right on it, and there was a red dragon attached to the ceiling.
Please tell me it was at least a red.
Yeah, of course.
It's a treasure.
And then my other one's a werewolf. Simply because flavor-wise, werewolves are really fun to run as a DM. I've run them a couple times in campaigns, and they are superbly entertaining when it comes to like how you set up the story for it. Why is there a phone? Anyways, but like I love the thematics of it, the setting you can create. So I've always wanted to fight one myself because they're really fun to mess with as a DM. So I figured it'd be fun to play through as a character.
Sounds like I see Rob taking some notes over there.
I would say best to throw at you at low level because they're right out immune to physical damage. So when you throw it at like a party at level 3s, especially if they're all melee classes, stuff gets wild.
Why would you do that? Like set the parameters so you have spellcasters at least. I mean, come on. Set them up for success, man.
It's not my fault everyone wants to play a variant human fighter, okay?
I never get to play melee. My monk, like the last one, Glenn Warren is like my only melee character I ever get to play. I'm that forever caster, right? Suwaki, how about you, Suwaki? What's your one monster you've always wanted to fight in D&D?
So it's a homebrew monster, and so it's a false Hydra, but I wish I didn't know what it was before I fought it. I know what they are, and I've ran them. So if I was
watch last episode,
but I would wish it would be a false Hydra that didn't know what they were.
We'll have to, Rob. We'll have to work on setting that up or something.
I just did.
I know, but doing it to where it's not called a false Hydra. Do it to where like how they write the books, right? Where it's like you're not calling out what it is. You're not saying what the monster is.
I mean, y'all didn't know what it was.
I did, but I don't metagame though, so I didn't.
I appreciate that.
That's the thing is like I would metagame like a hardcore, and I've ran a false Hydra twice. 2 different parties.
I couldn't even metagame in this last one. I had no idea what it was. I had never seen a false Hydra. No idea what it was.
They're beautiful, truly.
They are.
But what's Suwaki? What's the monster you'd never want to fight, ever? You'd never want sprung on you by a DM?
Mind Flayer, any kind of Mind Flayer.
I like
I always
it.
play martial classes, so usually that's the first one to go. First one to
See, and as a caster, for me, it's the exact opposite. It's a shade because I never play melee characters, so I had no strength score. How about you, Daniel? What's your monster you would never want sprung on you as a player?
God, I hate liches. I hate them with a passion because I played as a martial class once, and I got that freaking tether thing put on me. So like whenever it was dealt damage, I got hurt for it, and I was like, I hate this. This is stupid. So I never want to see one ever again.
You should see.
I mean, Rob, I love liches. You should always run a lich. I'll always love it if you do that.
You should look up. You should look up
You're
when
gonna love
Kryn
my answer.
Shinobon, the crystal shard Kryn Shinobon merged with a red dragon, and it became Draco Lich.
Yeah, Rob was telling me about Draco Liches one time. We're on the phone. He was letting me know about what they're kind of capable of, and I was like, "Nope, I'm good. Those could stay as far away from me as possible. It'd be great."
How about you, Rob? What's the character you would never want dropped in against you?
So funny enough, it's the same answer as Daniel, but for the opposite reason, because I have killed 4 way too quickly. I have killed 4 liches, like,
You gotta look for that phylactery, right? You just gotta find the phylactery, and you're good.
Basically, and just you beat him down, then find the phylactery, because you can take him out in one combat round if you are. My DMs tend to tell me that you should be really good at combat, and then I just bum rush a lich and do 200 damage outright, and it's dead.
I've got some stuff in the works that you'd like this stuff here coming up that I'm writing right now.
I like challenges in combat. I like being challenged.
What is there any upcoming content in D&D at all that you're super excited for? Whether it be your sessions, whether it be stuff you've seen on the horizon for D&D, what's stuff that you're excited for the future, Rob?
For ours, next season is going to be super exciting because dragons is the theme, Daniel.
Really?
But not normal dragons, and I won't say any more. But you can have fun with dragons, in different kinds of dragons, especially in like the new things with fizz bands and Dragonlance coming out and things like that. Which goes into my not on our stream portion. I'm excited for the new Dragonlance book.
Oh my God, yes.
It's been too long.
Yep. Super excited for that one also. How about you, Daniel? Anything coming up down the pipeline, whether it be D&D or the Banshees Whale? What's stuff that's got you excited for the future?
Yeah, D&D content-wise, honestly, I try to keep myself out of the know as much as possible, so I'm just surprised by a random book drop. So that's always my strategy when it comes to like Wizards of the Coast content or D&D content. I try to stay as backed off as possible, so that like one day I just open up Instagram and it's like brand new D&D book, and I'm like, oh, really? And then I get all excited.
Nice.
So it's fun. But in terms of Banshees Whale,
it'll be in your D&D Beyond app also.
Exactly. So
the day it drops, it'll be in there.
So like with D&D for Banshees Whale, though, I mean, I'm excited for the future because my schedule is starting to calm down immensely. So I'll be able to be more active in the participation and play in more one-shots and more campaigns with you guys. And because I always have fun. I always have a good time coming on and playing. And, I've never had a bad time playing in the party. So I always want to jump in as much as I can.
What about for your players, stuff that you've got here coming up?
Right now, I'm actually playing in a campaign. I'm not the Forever DM anymore. I've been able to play this time. So we're actually running through Curse of Strahd right now. And my buddy who's running it was DMing for another group for a long time. So he's a very experienced DM. So he runs good sessions. And we have a lot of fun with him playing. And he likes that I play because like having the mindset of a DM this makes me really bold in certain areas, but then less bold in other ones. I'm cautious when I need to be, but it's fun.
You can pick up on those cues a little bit better.
Yep.
When something might be safe, right, Suwaki?
Might seem might not be safe.
What about you, Suwaki? What are you excited for coming down the pipeline? Whether it's your sessions or anything from Wizards of the Coast or the new Dragonlance, what's got you excited?
I'm actually excited to run Spelljammer. So my players blew up their plane of existence in their last session. So
Nice.
yeah, Yeah. So
Why not,
see,
right?
instead of
Who hasn't?
doing a TPK, I gave them an out of the plane that they blew up. So now they have to decide how they're going to restore their plane. They're going to do that in Spelljammer
With
settings.
You didn't
space
give him 2 bag of
hamsters
holdings,
and-
did you?
No. They interrupted the spell, and then somebody opened a portal so they could get out, but somebody thought the portal was an enemy, so they blew up the portal. And I rolled a d20 to see what happened. Rolled a 1, so I decided that these two spells were going to collide with each other, and that was going to cause a singularity and fucked up the entire plane of existence. Luckily, one of the players is a warlock, and her mother is a different plane of existence, who's also her patron, so she saved them. Now they have to find a way to restore their plane of existence.
And this is why we made the Banshee's Whale Tavern an actual realm of dread. So you couldn't destroy, Faerun and then destroy the Banshee's Whale.
Exactly.
Right, and I'm gonna give you guys a surprise question. This one wasn't in the questions that I sent out to you. Suwaki, without much thought, what is your favorite class to play?
Fighter. Eldritch Knight. Fighter.
How about you, Daniel?
Little
What's
combat,
your-
little magic.
Oh, I'm partial to paladins. It was my first class I ever played, and I grew attached to him. So I love playing a good paladin.
And actually, let's go back to Suwaki. Sorry for cutting you off. You said a little bit of melee, a little bit of magic. What was it?
Yeah. Just a good mix of magic and melee.
Nice. Do you normally build like a racial class into that when you do it? Build your racials?
No.
Okay. Not trying to min max.
No, just I like playing ASMRs. They're my favorite class to play just because you get a little bit of flying and a little extra radiant damage. And the religious trauma playing an angel, definitely helps. But yeah, just I don't know. I like just make like being a melee fighter with a little bit of magic, just kind of woven into it.
Sounds like you're giving Daniel ideas for his paladin, for an angel paladin.
I'm so partial to Dragonborn paladins though. 'Cause that was the first class I ever made, ever played. I love having a breath weapon and being able to flavor it to the character. So I mean, paladins are always my favorite, and they always will be because I like being up in the front and fighting. So
Yeah, I think Rob kind of ruined me on Dragonborn. He's like, "Hey, you guys three, the three of you guys have to create a Dragonborn," and now I'm like, "All right, Emerald Dragonborn," and now I'm like, "That's my favorite character. That's all that
Yep.
I play is Silmanari, right?" And I built his lore, and I've got all of this crazy stuff. Like I'm writing for his lore, where he's a bartender, the proprietor of the Banshee's Whale and everything. But what's your favorite part about playing a paladin?
smite, and more smites. So in that first D&D session I mentioned, we played the big bad evil guy, and he was a necrotic being, and I was a paladin. So I was like, time to die. So I ended up
Holy
dealing out
damage.
like 139, 141 points of damage at one point, like in one combat sequence. It was cool, and I got hooked ever since. And like the different paths they've put in, like Path of Vengeance or Path of Glory, like you can really flavor a paladin to whatever you want it to be. And so it's a lot of fun. So I've had a lot of fun with that class.
And let's end things with Robert. Robert, what's your favorite class and why?
Everyone can probably guess from the type of DM I am. Wizard, 100 and 200% just wizard. And not multi-class wizard, just straight wizard. There are so many good spell lists for different wizard subclasses, especially the School of Enchantment. Made so much better with Tasha's. It's just carrying. You are a multi-tool, and I love that. You're not built onto one thing. There's not one monster you hate running into. You can make them. You can make a wizard good at anything. If you want to know.
And where you were talking about like the, no multi-classing, no watering down your wizard. I think 5e did a really good job of that at the end there, right before we head into 1D&D. I think that's probably my favorite part of the end of 5e is the end of multi-classing, right? Because like for me, I got my Celestial Warlock. But I think everybody kind of those subclasses now, you kind of have that subclass where you can dive into whatever class you want. And if you want to play that a ranged rogue, you can do that. If you want to play a healing warlock, you can do that. I think everything became much more multi-purpose kind of at the end, and we really got a lot of flavor to play with now. And I think that's my favorite part of heading into 1D&D, especially where they were talking about being able to bring anything up, is we're getting those 3E classes. We're getting those 3.5E classes. We're getting all that content. We're getting Ravenloft. We're getting all of these things and tools that we need to convert them into 5E instead of trying to homebrew it, and spending hours on hours of trying to bring in like witches and stuff like that. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Is I know a lot of people are interested in playing a lot of the old classes from, back in the day, the 3.5E classes, or AD&D, the 2E classes, or the D&D 1E classes. Well, I don't think anybody's calling out 1E. It's like that old head that's, still the same campaign they've been running since 1976 in his mom's basement.
And he's still
I
just
like
gonna
my
be
negative AC, and you're like, what?
Yeah. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and call it a night for our first Tavern Talk, really.
Yeah.
But here, really quick, to close things out, Robert, what's one piece of advice you have, really quick snippet that you have for new DMs?
Remember that your players are your friends. You're there to write a story together, and you're not just there to slaughter them.
How about you, Daniel? What's your piece of advice for new DMs?
Stick to the rule of cool. Let your players do things. Let them have some fun. Let them bend the rules. Let them play with their environment. They're going to have a great time and always want you to DM and come back to you. So practice the rule of cool.
How about you, Suaki?
Just relax. Like, your friends aren't going to judge you if you mess up. They're just happy you're doing it, and they're going to do whatever they can to make sure you're having a good time too. So don't be nervous.
Yeah, definitely. And I think my piece of advice that I would give any new DM is don't be scared to fall on your face. That's when we learn, right? When we have a bad session, when you're like, I really could have done this differently. And on top of that, you're never doing as badly as you think you are. I think that's my piece of advice, right? Is when I ran Candlekeep, I'm looking back at the footage, and it could have been much better. It really could have been.
It was good.
I thought that I was doing much worse when I was running it. Yeah. You're going to be much more critical of yourself than your friends are, because they're just happy to be hanging out. Like Daniel said, you guys are all friends. You're hanging out, have fun, feed off of each other, ask each other questions, especially the experienced players, and be open to creating house rules to make things easier for your players. Don't try and be, dead on. This is how 5e is played. Be flexible, because not everybody's going to want that Souls-like experience where you're just getting murdered every day. Nobody's, going to want to play not everyone's going to want to play a D&D session where nobody can possibly die. Lots of people like lots of different experiences. So I think be flexible, be open to feedback, be coachable. But at the end of the day, remind your players that you're learning too.
Yep.
If your players are very critical of you, remind them that, hey, you guys can always DM.
There's no shortage of players.
Yeah, definitely. Right. And that's not always the case. And I think that's one of the beauties of kind of what this space that we're creating, right? The Banshees Whale, the whether you like playing hybrid, in person, we're going to have those sessions, have a space for people to go to. It's the community is much bigger than you think it is. And God, it's just wonderful, right? Where we've got the Avondrow now, not everybody, it's not always 100% evil, not black
I'm really
or white.
excited about the Avondrow.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah. All right, but that's it for tonight. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Suwaki. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Robert, for being a part of the very first Tavern Talk. And thank you to everybody for tuning in. Hopefully you guys picked up some stuff. The next Tavern Talk we have, I'm going to open it up to audience participation. We're going to vote for questions. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night.